right, welcome to Cafe Wish Podcast interview.
3, 2, and all right, guys, we're back here continuing our experience here, documenting, recording our journey and little vacay of our time here spent in Romblon. Today, fun fact, today is the Filipino Independence Day. And hey, Ken.
Hi.
So I have a question. Can you please just give me the breakdown of the history of the Independence Day here in the Philippines?
Okay. So, as far as I know, the Philippines celebrates Independence Day every June 12. So, the Philippine Independence Day was proclaimed on June 12, 1898, to be exact. The declaration took place at the home of Emilio Aguinaldo in Kawit, Cavite. So, additional information is that Emilio Aguinaldo is the first ever president of the Philippines. It marked the Philippines' declaration of independence from Spain because we were colonized by the Spaniards more than 300 years. So it's quite, or it's really long time. The Philippine flag was first officially seen on that declaration or that celebration as well. And then the national anthem, which is the Lupang Hinirang, was played for the first time as an instrumental march. Later, in 1898, control of the Philippines was transferred from Spain to the United States through the Treaty of Paris. Full independence was eventually recognized on July 4, 1946 through the Treaty of Manila. And then in 1962, Diosdado Macapagal moved the official Independence Day celebration from July 4 to June 12 to honor the 1898 declaration. So, fun fact, the Philippines was the first republic established in Asia through the first Philippine Republic in 1899.
Wow. That's what I'm talking about. That's some really good history right there. Thank you for breaking that down. So what does it mean? Can you tell me, as a Filipino, what does independence mean for you?
Of course, as a Filipino and as a human, we want a life of freedom. Also, as an example is that as a LGBTQIA plus member or LGBTQ person, Independence Day equates freedom from expressing ourselves, expressing myself, how I dress, how I talk, how I express my ideas as well to other people. So, to sum it up, independence for me is very important regardless of race, gender, and socio-political or socio-economical status in every person's life.
I think that's a perfect answer. You sound like you are on a beauty pageant. Very good answer. Very good answer. Thank you for sharing that. So briefly, can I give you some history about the Independence Day in America?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I want to know more about US.
All right. So in the United States, Independence Day, for us, the United States celebrates Independence Day on July 4th. Independence Day, for us, it commemorates the adaptation of the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration announced that the 13 American colonies were no longer under British rule. The document was primarily drafted by Thomas Jefferson. Now, it's also important to know that these colonies were established by people who are known as colonizers, right? So this is their Independence Day from Great Britain, right? So continuing on, that the document was primarily drafted by Thomas Jefferson, right? And it was approved by the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia. The Declaration stated that all people have the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Once again, this is drafted in view of white Euro people, colonizers, right? These people were not from America. They came from Europe under British rule, right? And majority of them weren't quote unquote civilized people. The most people who came over here were degenerates. They were criminals. They were people who were unsavory. Also, there were people who were looking for a fresh opportunity, a new life. A lot of people who were poor or in poverty. A lot of people who were seeking to build something beyond Europe, beyond what they were used to accommodating their lives to a rulership, to a king of sorts. So they were looking for their own freedom. Eventually, that's what they got, right? They got their freedom from British rule. Coming over here from Europe to America was known as Manifest Destiny, of course. And also it was a time where they known the Americas as the New World, the brave New World. So they came over here, the colonizers, to establish that type of life for them. Eventually, they got their independence once again from Britain. Once again, the Declaration stated that all people have the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The war for independence continued until the British until the British was defeated, and the signing of the Treaty of Paris in 1783, which is kind of connected to what the Treaty of Paris that the Philippines went through,
Yes.
right? Independence Day is celebrated with fireworks. This is how we celebrate it, with fireworks, parades, concerts, picnics, and displays of the American flag. Now, it's important to also understand is that July 4th, 1776, not everyone technically was free. So there were tribes, the indigenous tribes, who we come to know as the Native Americans. Some of them weren't free, some of them were free. Okay. And then during that time, there were other tribes as well who were known to be from the motherland of Africa, right? But both sets of tribes were black people. You had the indigenous Native Americans who were dark-skinned people. Some had woolly hair, some had straight hair, some had curly hair. And then you had the indigenous tribes of Africa coming over here as well, over here meaning to America, and they weren't free, right? So the pursuit of happiness, liberty, and life was not privileged to them, right? The land was stolen from the Native Americans. Their bodies were stolen. Their wombs were stolen, right? The tribes that came from Africa. Stolen bodies, right? Stolen wombs, right? And they weren't free. They weren't even considered human. So for us, right, we were considered property, just like the Filipinos were. Mm-hmm. For the Filipinos, when you guys were enslaved under the Spaniards, you guys weren't considered human either. You guys were considered property. So for us...
As far as I know, there are back then on the Spanish colonization, there were like innocent ladies or women that were raped and like became slave by the colonizers, like Japanese, Spaniards. something like that.
The Philippines has a very dark history, not just physically, but also not just in your phenotypes, but also in the poetic way of how things worked out in your history. And Japan too. Japan was in slavery. All you guys were enslaved. All of Asia was in slavery. The whole world was in slavery. Okay, the whole earth was enslaved, except for in Europe, right, during this time. So, point being, going back to July 4th, 1776, the adaptation of the Declaration of Independence and the birth of the United States as an independent nation was declared, right? But the point being, independence to me means something different than a white American. For me, independence goes into self-determination, to be able to determine who you are, what you are, and how you want to live your life fully, with the same rights and privileges as the highest people in your society, right? To be treated fair and equally, and to have the same resources and to be able to establish yourself freely as everyone else. And it's interesting, you talked about the LGBTQIA community. Well, for me, freedom is also connected to that as well. I like to imagine myself, being able to live my life according to the rights and privileges as everyone else, whether they're straight or gay, right? Or LGBTQIA, however that people identify. I think everybody should have a certain level and standard of freedom. I believe that everyone should have a certain level of standard of self-determination. But I can't speak for everyone, and I'm not going to. I'm going to speak for me. So for me, I want self-determination as a group belonging to a bigger group who are descendants from chattel slavery, from slavery in general. Also, here's a fun fact I also want to bring up in this. I'm going to treat this like a podcast really quickly. So during 1492 was the hallmark for the year where Christopher Columbus and the Spaniards and the conquistadors set out to the New World, right? It kicked off colonization. What most people don't make the connection to and the dots to is that Spain won their freedom from the Moors, who are black people. The Moors were black people who ruled Western Europe. And it was during this battle of Grenada in the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal. The Moors lost the war. The white Spaniards won the war. Okay. And because of that, that gave them freedom and liberty to have access and resources that the Moors previously had. So the Western Europe was ruled by the Moors, who were black, and the Eastern Europe during this time was ruled by black Catholics. So you had black Catholics. You also had black Jews on both sides. You had black Jews on the eastern part of Europe, and you had black Jews on the western part of Europe. You had, I'm talking about in rulership, right? And they pretty much were at peace with one another. However, you heard about the Holy Wars? Okay.
No.
So during the 11th century to, I believe, the 14th century, that's where a lot of the Holy Wars were fought. And it was, in my opinion, how I'm breaking this history down, it was black people fighting black people, their own people, over the land. So you had black Moors, you had black Jews, and you had black Catholics fighting over the land, of their own land, right? And this is in what we call today the Middle East, what they call Israel or Israeli Israel today. So you have these black people fighting over this land here. And for centuries, they've been doing that. Now, of course, there's white Muslims who existed at this time. There are white Catholics who existed at this time. And there are white Jews who existed at this time. But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the black ones. So the black ones were in power and prominent. So here's another point. The eastern side of Europe was considered the new Holy Roman Empire. And that was predominantly ruled by black people. So to connect these dots here, from the 11th century to the 14th century, you have black people ruling Europe. Approaching the 15th century, 1492, black folks lost rulership and power in Western Europe, which later followed in Eastern Europe. Okay. Also in 1492, it set sail. White people of Spain set sail to the New World. Colonization started to kick off. The Portuguese and Spain were in competition with one another, and which led into Britain, the Dutch, all of them got involved in the slave trade. Now, there was the trans-Sahara slave trade going on almost 1,000 years, right? It kicked off since the 4th century until now. It's still kind of going on, right? So it hasn't really died out as far as the trans-Sahara. Trans-Sahara slavery, once again, started in the 4th century. And it continues today, right? So almost 1,000 years. But not to switch gears necessarily, but I want to continue the concept of what I'm talking about of connecting dots here. So please try to follow along. 11th century, 14th century, okay, we know black people were ruling Europe. Then 15th century, black people fell out of power. Then 15th century, white Europeans came into power and started enslaving people from Africa, from Australia, from Asia, from South America, even North America. Okay. So why is this important? Because I'm going down to this point here. I want to talk about Juneteenth. Do you know about Juneteenth?
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, so Juneteenth is a U.S. holiday commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. Juneteenth, the name combines June and 19th. It marks June 19th, 1865, when Union General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston and announced that enslaved people in Texas were free. This came more than 2 years after Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Juneteenth is often called America's second Independence Day because it celebrates freedom for formerly enslaved African Americans. In 2021, Juneteenth became a U.S. federal holiday. So it took almost nearly 200 years before it became a federal holiday. All right. So that's how you white people in America feel about black people's freedom. All right. That's a joke. In 2021, Juneteenth became a U.S. federal holiday when it was signed into law by Joe Biden, who was the president at the time.
Oh, Joe Biden is not... is white, but he signed it.
Yeah.
He is supportive.
Yeah. Celebrations commonly include parades, music, educational events, which we're doing here. This will be a continuation of the celebration of Juneteenth from my end. Family gatherings and cultural festivals. So while we're here together traveling to Romblon, I'm also celebrating, Juneteenth as well,
okay.
which is technically my American holiday. Yeah. So this is why it matters. While July 4th, 1776 celebrates the nation's independence from Britain, June 19th, 1865 commemorates the realization of freedom for many enslaved people who had not yet received or experienced that freedom. Both dates are important. However, we haven't gotten our reparations. Have Philippines got their reparations from Spain?
What is reparation?
Payments. Have you received any? Has your nation ever received payments from Spain?
I don't think so. I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, well maybe we'll look it up in another day, another time.
But one thing I know is that we could easily get visa or be a resident in Spain if a Filipino will live there or study there in just 2 years.
Okay.
So in other countries, it's like 10 years, like more than 10 years. But in Spain, we could be a Spanish resident or resident in Spain in just 2 years.
Interesting.
It's very short, or it's shorter than other countries.
Okay. Well, I think that was a good negotiation. At least you got that part. I'm pretty sure you guys have more to get, but just from my opinion, I think that's a good start. But who am I? I'm just an American. So I want to briefly talk about Emancipation Proclamation. Have you heard of that before?
No.
Okay, I think I briefly talked about it just moments ago, but I'll give you a little bit more history on it. Emancipation Proclamation was issued by Abraham Lincoln during the American Civil War. It was announced on September 22nd, 1862, and took effect on January 1st, 1863. The proclamation declared that enslaved people in states rebelling against the Union were forever free. That's quote unquote. It did not immediately free all enslaved people in the United States because it applied only to Confederate-controlled territories where the Union did not yet have full control. The proclamation transformed the Civil War into a fight not only to preserve the Union, but also to end slavery. It allowed African Americans to join the Union military. Nearly 200,000 black soldiers and sailors eventually served. Okay. The complete legal abolishment of slavery came later with the ratification of the 13th Amendment in December 1865. So it was step by step. It wasn't altogether free, right? And we're still fighting for our freedom because in our eyes, and from my understanding, once again, I could be wrong for how other black people feel and black people in the States. When I mean black people, I'm talking about black Americans. There's black people all around the planet. But when I'm talking about black people in this context, I'm talking about African Americans or black Americans or descendants of slavery, whether Indian or from Africa, right? We still are searching for our freedom because not all of us are 100% free in our minds because we haven't got our reparations, our repair. There are things that have been done, yes, step by step, and ways have been made step by step, but it's not full because we fully were enslaved. We weren't partially enslaved, right? We wasn't enslaved on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and had Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. No, we were enslaved 100% through and through from 1492 because there were some black slaves.
It's like forever.
Yeah, we were enslaved from 1492 because there were slaves that came over from Europe with the colonizers, with the conquistadors, with the Spaniards, with Christopher Columbus. They came over here with the priests, what do you call them? What do they call these guys? You have the padres, right? The priests, the fathers, and
pastors.
They weren't called priests, padres, friars, with the friars, right? And they came over with them. But they came as slaves and translators. Right? What were they translating? They were translating Hebrew and Aramaic. And they were also journaling, and they also were people who were painting and drawing images as well. So, but they weren't free. They were slaves. So our slavery started technically in 1492, if you want to be honest with that. And we didn't get free until 1865, and that's debatable, right? So we're looking at what, almost 400 years? Yeah. So anyway, the Emancipation Proclamation is considered one of the most important documents in American history because it paved the way for the end of slavery and expanded the meaning of freedom in the United States. And here's the key point. Freedom has always been on the backs of black people, the definition of freedom, or what it means to be free. Not on white people, but on black bodies. We've always had to negotiate for our freedom, and then us fighting for our freedom has always expanded, because I'm going to read it again. I'm reading a little history here just to make sure that I am correct. So let me read this part again. The Emancipation Proclamation is considered one of the most important documents in American history because it paved the way for the end of slavery and expanded the meaning of freedom in the United States. So that's my little spiel here, this little mini podcast that we got going on here. That was just supposed to be a journal, a journey journal, record, but I decided to turn this into a podcast. So I think it's better that way. Do you have any final thoughts you want to expound upon?
Happy Independence Day, Filipinos and Americans.
Hey, happy Juneteenth, family. All right. Take care.